Alone in a room at a desk with a waste paper basket at one end, a man sits on a chair built of matchsticks on a sandpaper floor. The room is not much larger than a shack, and it's tucked away in a tenement maze stacked with buildings in a blaze of dimly lit alleys with fire escape backsides. A hot plate, a blanket on a small cot, bare walls around a wooden desk, a trash basket, an unlit matchstick chair, and a sink on the wall. That's about it. At the end of the desk, the waste paper basket fills as he sits, always in the face of death, in constant danger of those matches scraping themselves lit and engulfing him in flames. So just in case, there's a water bucket underneath the sink. It's empty. A pool of creeping crimson is spreading across the floor. It's human blood, leaking from the sole of the boot of the man sitting at the desk. In that mud-stained sole of this man's left boot, there's a hole that extends all the way through his foot. There's a matching hole through the top of his rubber Wellington boot. Although he bleeds out slowly onto the bare wood floorboards, he continues to type on an old Remington, or he writes with a pen and sweeps the pages of finished fiction directly into the waste paper basket at the end of his desk. As the basket fills, the writer dumps it into a shiny black trash bag. When that bag is plump and round, he ties a knot in the top and walks it outside to the dumpster. The city comes clamoring in white trucks to empty those dumpsters earlier than anyone wants to be woken up. After polluting the blank black back alleyways of the eastern block of the tenement maze with noise, the trash bag and the dump truck will be deposited at the landfill on the outskirts of town, where surrounding neighbors complain to City Hall about the smell instead of moving somewhere else. The truck will climb a winding path to the top of the steep hill of trash, and hydraulics will lift the bed so that smashed boxes and broken glass and stinking food for the rats spills out from the back. And the shiny black bag stuffed with pages and knotted at the top will fall out and tumble down the far side of the trash pile, rolling and bouncing off old steel drums and the coiled springs of dirty used mattresses. Finally, the swollen bag of useless fiction will make its way to the bottom to rest in the grass near the edge of a tree line where a spindly lone oak tree spreads its leafy fingers like an umbrella under the sun. This secluded corner of the trash heap is where this man's bag of stories will come to die, where nobody ever looks. But back in the tenement maze, the metal doors of the dumpsters slam and clang with iron weight as steel arms lift them high above the rusty mouths of the dump trucks. Every Thursday before dawn, they wake the neighbors in the nearby buildings, and the tenants' letters to the city will be scathing over the obnoxious hour the trash pickup begins in their neighborhood. When our man who's been up all night filling his trash bag with pages has finally laid down to get some rest, a metal door wakes a baby up on the first floor of a dark brick building on the edge of a maze of dark brick buildings. The sound of the infant crying wakes its mother up in the next room, who flips on the light and scrambles to find her slippers. Her husband, a gruff, pudgy runt with a round, hairy gut protruding over the bedsheets, yells at the top of his lungs, "Janice, goddammit, turn out the light. It's too bright, and it's the goddamn middle of the night." "Hank, for Pete's sake, lower your voice," she snaps back. "Do you want to wake the neighbors?" But by now it's too late. The dog in the next apartment has already begun to bark at the muffled voices. Well, the Russian bride that lives down the hall just got married to her boyfriend, who's tall, with flesh the color of an 8-ball. And even though they just got married last week, she squeezed out twins that were whiter than sheep that started to cry louder than the barking dog that woke them up. That blushing bride is a deep sleeper, and her husband wouldn't get up either, and those 2 crying crackers woke the whole first floor of the building up. Then from the outside it must have looked like the 4th of July, as each window of the tenement rise lit up. The screaming neighbors were an urban rooster, signaling the break of dawn. Just as our man lies down from an early morning late-nighter of typing out a trash bag worth of paper, he's jarred awake by his raging neighbors, who are making enough noise to wake up a young boy in the next building over. Now many of the people living in those brick rows of fire escape mazes sleep with open windows. So when that young boy starts to cry for his mother, his sister wakes up where she fell asleep studying, and she straightens her neck. The cat wakes up screeching and darts from the room, out her front door and down the main hall of the first floor, wailing feline obscenities and pissing off the crotchety old lady on two, who immediately calls the landlord's office. But nobody's there that early, and the phone rings and rings and rings when that wretched old bitch falls asleep holding it. The landlord's office is all the way on the far end of the maze, in the western block, where the ringing phone wakes the families that live around that part of the complex. It begins a chain reaction that eventually spreads from building to building, bleeding into the many chain reactions from the dozen or so dump trucks waking the maze up eastward. The eastern block spreads westward with a wave of slowly illuminating windows from nightstand lamps and angry, screaming spouses, wailing babies and animals howling. Finally, the commotion meets in the middle, and the whole maze is annoyed they're up so early, and the sun spills out over the horizon to spoil the night with the scald, drudging responsibilities that come with daylight. And of course, with all this noise, there's no way our man's going to get any rest. So he pulls the covers reluctantly to the floor, convinced that it's useless to try and sleep anymore, and he shuffles in his bare feet to the shower, where he'll brush his teeth and empty the hot water tank onto his back. Once he's scrubbed himself as clean as he could be with his dirty back monkey disease, he pulls himself into a drab olive shirt which he latches with buttons to his neck. His pants, stained by the prior day's work, are strapped to his waist with a black leather belt with teeth marks in it. His tall rubber boots, caked with dried mud, leaves, and blood, he steps into, and roots through a bowl of pennies for his keys, locking the door behind him as he leaves. Then he drives in the mundane morning through a dense fog to a storefront building on the south side of town. Inside, hundreds of folding chairs are lined with stubbly men in oily overalls, with hard hats and work boots on, waiting around for a number to be called. The inside of the building looks 100 times larger than what you'd expect from standing out on the sidewalk. A whole city's worth of hungry and unemployed fill every seat in what seems to be an airplane hangar full of chairs lined in rows. He sits in the last empty seat he could find in the back, alone, and watches the waiting workers pull mouthfuls from their early morning coffee thermoses. Finally, a job opens up and his name is called. At a window on the edge of the room, they hand him a slip of paper with an address written in blue ballpoint ink. Back in his car, he hums across the city, rumbling on bad tires to the outskirts of town, where the houses thin out into open fields of corn and wheat. But roving gangs of drunken teenagers have stolen the signs that mark the roads, so the bare poles stand naked and useless at the corners of a whole county's worth of intersections that all look the same. The only structure even close to the address is way up on the top of a steep, grassy incline, where rolling hills of trash bags are heaped up to rot in the city dump. He drives up a gravelly road that climbs to where the garbage trucks blow their loads, sending the trash to roll downhill to land where it may. He takes the slip of paper inside the small aluminum structure at the top of the hill, hoping someone can help him find the address. Instead, an overworked desk clerk with a gaunt, toothless mouth and elephant gray flesh, high, bony cheeks, and an alcoholic gut like an olive on a toothpick, takes a slip of paper from our man and hands him a slew of empty garbage bags and a pole with a spike at the end. "This place is a mess. Go out there and start picking up trash," says the clerk through his coffee-stained dentures. Our nameless man stands with the garbage bags in his hands and asks, "You want me to pick up trash at the dump?" "Not the trash in the actual pile, all that stuff out on the lawn, around the building and down the road you came in on." So the man, only in it for a daily wage, decides it's not really his place to question such an ironic situation as the one that's unraveling in front of his face. With the junk in his veins just as filthy as the trash in those bags, he couldn't think of a better metaphor for the addiction that rots his brains, or for the tedium of living a soul-numbing life that is as meaningless as picking up trash at the city dump. He takes the empty bags and walks outside, down a hill and around the outer lying rim of where acres and acres of trash meets the edge of a surrounding forest. Soon he's far out of view of anyone who might be watching. Having been woken this morning before he fell asleep, he looks for a secluded place to lie down. The man scours along the perimeter of trash, sizing up couches and mattress pads, and decides it best to just lie down in the grass. So he finds an empty spot by a spindly old oak tree in the shady corner of the world that nobody knows about. He reclines in the grass at the edge of the dirt and uses a shiny black trash bag stuffed with pages and pages of soft, cushiony fiction to rest his head, on a pillow of his own dead, worthless thoughts that are unread, unshared, and uncommunicated with the world, just shed, relinquished, and let go to fall where they may in the universe. Finally, his words have purpose as they cradle his cranium. In the end, they were only meant to be useful to him, and he sleeps for hours in the hidden shade of the woods behind the city dump. Eventually, at the end of his shift, the man wanders back into the building at the top of the hill. "Where are your bags?" The supervisor's voice said he'd seen it all, and he'd not be fooled by gold brickers who think they can slink off and sleep on the job. "I threw 'em in the trash pile," he says, pointing with a finger to the stinking mound outside in the direction of a whole city's worth of festering bags. "Where else would I put 'em? You were supposed to bring 'em to me to verify you've been busy. We're not running a bed and breakfast," the supervisor says, eyeballing the bits of dried leaves and the fabric of the man's hoodie left over from nature's mattress. Our man shrugs both shoulders, raises his eyebrows, and blows out his cheeks, and releases his breath in one apathetic huff. Without proof, the foreman had no teeth, and therefore no bite. After a stern, knowing scowl and a check-marked demerit etched into the page of his clipboard next to the guy's name, the foreman hands him a different slip of paper with a single 13-digit number on it. So he takes this pay stub to his car and drives the same slow roads back to the south side like he has 1,000 times, to end up in front of that deceptively small-looking storefront, where he walks through the open warehouse full now of empty wooden folding chairs, and he sits in the front row on the edge of the aisle running up the center. No one else is there except for him. So he waits in motionless hang time, in stone silence, for the shade over the bank teller type of window to lift. When it finally does, he hands a slip of paper to a lady with dried, frizzy coils of burgundy hair streaming from her mind. She plugs the long number into a machine and it processes a check, which she cranks from a rusty metal box with gears and a dull steel lever she pulls, and she hands him the check through a narrow tray underneath the slot in the window. Then he drives all the way downtown, past the post office and the fairgrounds and into the doldrum suburbs, to a small white building with a drive-through window to cash it. When he gets the money, he makes his way back to the maze of tenement buildings and parks somewhere around the center of the western block. Down an alley of overflowing cans of garbage with flies and maggots and rotten meat at the back of one of the buildings, he climbs nimbly up a rusty fire escape, and kneeling on a metal grate 6 floors up, ducking and watching over his shoulder, he knocks on a window. If it only opens a crack with a gap no wider than a pen cap, he'll still find a way to squeeze through. Inside is a filthy, dark kitchen with a dirty, peeling linoleum floor. The only light in the room comes from a bulb hanging from a fixture one room over. He can't see the faces of the 2 brutish black men standing with their backs against separate walls, facing each other with baseball bats and crowbars and swallowed up in the shadows. Someone else stands quietly guarding the back door. The kitchen floor moans with age as the man makes his way through, gripping the money he earned sleeping at the city dump this afternoon. Through the dining room, he moves down a dark alleyway into a brightly lit, well-decorated bathroom. The man knows, as he looks around at the brand-new fixtures, the expensive ceramic floor tiles, the oversized walk-in shower and bubbling hot tub, that the gym bags full of money he spent there over the years has paid for it all. When he looks in the mirror, he sees nothing, and he takes the money he ran all over town for and flushes it down the swirling waters of the brand-new toilet. Then, without emotion or care to the cycle he's caught in, where calendar pages are as useless as yesterday's spent dope money, He returns to the kitchen and stops in front of the first hulking man, who hands him a single bullet. The next menacing man standing in the shadows gives him a gun, which he loads, cocks back the hammer, and shoots himself in the foot with. Two more gunshots flash off in the distance, either an echo of his own weakness ringing out for the world to hear and for him to deny, or one of his neighbors involved in a murder-suicide, or some other poor wretch trapped in the wheel that spins and spins but goes nowhere. Someone else steeped in the mire of self-abuse and the ritual torture of shooting themselves in the foot with the same mistakes that impede progress day after day, thinking this day it might be different. But each bullet is an excuse, and the cylinder of the pistol is a carousel of spinning days, a revolving door stuck in motion. The man hands the revolver to the brute guarding the back door and leaves a trail of blood on the linoleum floor as he walks out into the sixth-floor hallway. With his fresh daily wound, he sits silent in his car as he drives once more through the maze of depressing bricks 10 stories high of wasted lives to the bare, secluded walls of his dingy room buried in the far eastern block of rat-trap buildings. Carefully, he lowers himself into his matchstick chair and sits, as so he sat yesterday and the whole week before, scribbling words that will end up in the wastebasket near a growing puddle of blood running across the treacherous uncertainty of a sandpaper floor.